On the morning of November 9th, 1891, Ottie Cline Powell rubbed his eyes and squinted as light filled the little loft. The soft clang of the cook stove down in the kitchen meant his mother was building up the fire to make breakfast. It had rained yesterday, and the sun glinted off the raindrops on the oak leaves outside his window. His father would be working on the corn harvest today. He laid back on the heavy tick mattress and closed his eyes before getting up to start the day. Breakfast was good. Fresh eggs, a little fatback, and his favorite, fresh-baked biscuits. Ottie cleaned his plate and saved a little piece of biscuit for later. He was only 5, but his appetite equaled his older brother's. When his mother cleared the table, Ottie half-heartedly tried to get out of school by offering to help his father with the corn crop. But his father, a part-time farmer and a part-time minister at the local church, had seen this scene play out before. And soon, Ottie was getting ready for school. It was chilly outside. Ottie pulled on his jacket. His mother handed him the little brown cap from the shelf, and he pulled it down on his head. He and his brothers were soon racing down the path toward the little one-room school. His brothers were older, so Ottie ran faster to keep up. He could do anything they could. He'd show them. Nanny Gilbert rang the school bell and called her class into the little school. She had made a small fire in the stove to break the chill. She called out the first lessons. With all ages in one room, keeping the children engaged could be hard, but she was good at her job. As the morning wore on, the little room grew cooler. They would need a fire this afternoon. At recess, she asked the boys to bring back some firewood for the stove. They raced to the door, and she sat down at her desk while the girls studied. The girls would go out for the second recess while the boys studied. Miss Gilbert quietly ate the sandwich she had brought for lunch. As the boys bounded in after recess, they dropped off their firewood and the girls headed out. In the confusion, no one noticed one little boy missing. Nanny Gilbert put away her lunch and quieted the boys down by asking them to start their next lessons. But something was wrong. She asked the boys where Ottie was, but no one was sure. She went outside and called Ottie, but there wasn't any answer. Her calm look hid her worry as she asked the children to come outside to look for her. The search for Ottie had begun. Ottie had found a stick of wood bigger than any the older boys had gathered, but it was stuck in the brush. He pulled the stick with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. He knew he could do this. He pulled and twisted until it finally gave way. He looked around to show the other boys his prize, but they had gone. He'd been so intent on his task that he hadn't noticed them heading back to the school. He smiled as he pulled the stick down the path, imagining the looks on their faces when he walked in with the most firewood of all. The stick was heavy, so he let the back part of it drag in the path. It left a little furrow in the soft ground. Ottie hummed a tune and started to run, pulling the stick behind him. With the children's search failing to find Ottie, Miss Gilbert sent word to the parents near the school that Ottie was missing. They passed the word, and soon other parents, along with Ottie's father, gathered at the school to search for the little boy. They began the search near the school. The older boys told them about the limb Ottie was working on, so the search moved to that spot. They saw a small furrow in the road, but it was heading in the wrong direction, away from the school up the path toward Bluff Mountain. Probably just an animal pulling something along. With no sign of Ottie, they regrouped at the school and formed a plan to begin searching in ever-widening circles around the school until they found him. With any luck, they'd find him before supper and nightfall. Ottie stopped and looked around. The tree branch was heavy, so he dropped it by the side of the path. He called for his classmates, but the only answer was the wind rustling in the tops of the trees. He would make better time getting back to the school if he left the tree branch here, so he ran forward on the path without it. He'd come back and get it once he got back to the school. He was sure it was just up ahead. It had to be. The search at the school grew. Word spread, and eventually 1,500 people were searching. As each area was searched, they widened the search area. Henry Wood had brought in his hunting dog. The dog and Ottie often played together, and Wood thought he might help in the search. He held a shirt Ottie's father brought to help him get the scent. At one point, the dog ran up the path heading to Bluff Mountain. He soon returned, and they assumed he had just been chasing an animal. No 5-year-old child would climb through the brush heading up that mountain trail. In their haste to find him, no one remembered the little furrow dragged along the center of the road. Later, Wood would wonder if his dog had found Ottie when he ran up the trail to Bluff Mountain. Had Ottie rubbed his head before the dog ran back to the schoolhouse? They were questions he'd never be able to answer. The bright sun of the day was turning to dusk, but Ottie ran on. His legs were burning from the long climb. His calls for help returned no answers. As he ran into a small grove of pine trees, he stopped to catch his breath. It was late in the year, and there was a heavy blanket of pine needles under the trees. He found a flat area under an old oak tree beside the path. The pine needles looked so soft. Maybe he could rest here for just a few minutes. He lay down on the bed of pine needles. The bed of needles was soft, like his tick bed at home. He thought about his dog, Bear. He wished he was here with him. There were plenty of sticks to throw for him to run after. He smiled, thinking of Bear chasing sticks and of the biscuits this morning. After he rested, he'd get going again, and by tomorrow morning he'd be back home, listening to his mom making biscuits in the old cook stove. He burrowed down in the pine needles, and pulled his little brown cap lower on his head. It was getting cold, but the bed of pine needles was so soft. He closed his eyes for just a minute. So tired. Soon he was dreaming about tomorrow morning at home. As his sleep deepened, dusk turned to night. He wouldn't have to face the cold night on the mountain. A smile crossed his face as he dreamed of the warm morning at home. A light snow began to fall as the air grew colder, but Ottie didn't feel it as he slept in the warm bed of pine needles and memories. The search would continue for weeks. Eventually, people lost hope, leaving only Ottie's father going out every morning, searching for his son. The next spring, Wood, N.M. Coleman, and Mr. Lipscomb were hunting when Wood's dog started trailing something up a trail toward the top of Bluff Mountain. Wood would say later that he didn't know what had prompted them to hunt in this area. It wasn't a spot they usually hunted. They followed the dog up the path and found Ottie, still lying in his bed of pine needles, his little brown cap pulled down on his head. They sent word to his father, who was holding church services in town. When he was told that his son had been found, he simply looked up and said thank you, and ran from the church to bring his boy home. As time passed, the little boy lost in the mountains remained in people's hearts. J.B. Huffman, a local English teacher, released a booklet describing Ottie's ordeal. Huffman would craft a cross made of cement, and then carry the heavy cross up the mountain to the spot where Ottie was found. In 1917, the Forest Service cleared an area for a fire tower near the site. Out of respect, they left the cross in place. Eventually, funds were raised to place a bronze plaque at the site telling the story of Ottie's odyssey. The plaque was placed on a pedestal in the pine grove where Ottie lay down that night. The Appalachian Trail passes by the spot, and hikers took notice of the story. Trinkets began appearing on the plaque. Hikers posted their respects to Ottie at the shelter near the site. The monument was installed 60 years ago, but trinkets still appear today, with the hikers adopting the little boy lost as their own. Ottie never saw the view from atop Bluff Mountain. This clearing was cut many years after he lay down here that night, but it will always be tied to his story. So if you'd like to take a hike sometime, head up to Bluff Mountain. When you reach the top of the mountain, take some time to soak in the view. Then follow the path a few feet and pay your respects at the bronze plaque telling the story of Ottie Cline Powell. Look around at the little pine grove and the old oak tree over the spot. And if you feel the urge, take a little change out of your pocket, or maybe the trinket you brought from home, and leave it there on the plaque to remember the little boy lost on the mountain.